What's going on, guys? It's Jason of the Forestry Project. In today's video, I want to be putting what we've been doing the last few weeks, identifying trees, to use out on your property and show you how you can start identifying the trees on your property and how you might want to keep everything organized. So we're going to go through, I'm going to show you how I take notes and talk about some of the different ways you might can do that and talk about some of the importance of understanding what species are out on your property. So real quick, let's look out where I'm standing and look at some of the different species out there and why you might want to know the difference. So if you look out through here, we have muscadine vines, which is what you can see here. But then you're also going to have Virginia creeper, and that's going to be the 5-leaf. And then look right here. You actually have some poison ivy down in there. And there's a lot of poison ivy going through here. So it is important to understand the difference of these so you know what you can touch and what you can't touch. So what is another reason you might want to be able to identify trees? And I don't know about everyone, but for me as a landowner, I take a lot of pride in knowing my property. And as part of knowing my property, that is knowing what is out there. So let's get into it. I'm going to show you how I take notes and keep track of everything, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. So we'll kind of go through those as well, and that way you can pick whatever way works best for you. Thinking about some of the ways that you can learn plants, one of the easiest ways to actually identify plants is either using a dichotomous key like I've shown you in this book, or they actually have phone apps, and I hope to dive into that soon, doing a comparison between them. But you can also use your phone and take pictures of plants and identify them that way. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually go through identifying your plants. Now we need to also discuss, so how do you remember your plants? There can be hundreds of different plants out on your property, and how do you remember all their species, all the names, what the leaves look like? That's a lot to keep track of. And the first thing I want to say is that won't happen overnight. So what I recommend doing, what I've found a lot of success in, is go through and maybe identify 1 or 2 plants every time you're out there. Even if you identified 1 plant every time you were out there and you went out there, say, every week, you would still have 52 plants at the end of the year that you learned. Now that may not be everything, but as we've talked about in a lot of the videos, the podcast, learning your property is going to take time. That's not something that is just going to happen overnight. So baby steps. Now, there's a lot of different ways to keep track of what plants are out there. I really like the index cards. I'll keep them in a Ziploc baggie just to kind of keep them safe, and I'll use just a standard mechanical pencil. And what I will typically do is on one side, draw the leaf, and then on the other side, you'll write the name and the identifying features, what you think is interesting, what you notice about it, and then also note where it is on the property. Now, if you want to learn where stuff is out on the property, I encourage you watch some of our videos on getting started with land management and learning your property. Those are going to be very useful for actually being able to dive in and map everything out. But once you've done that, we can start to decide which trees are where. So if you want to, even have a spot that you write stand and say what stand it's in. If you want to get even more specific, you can say a specific feature on the property. You can have a cardinal direction of the stand, you know, the north side of the oak savanna is where I saw this plant. And you can start to do it that way. Now, there's a lot of other ways you can do it. You can take pictures and document it on your phone. You can get composition notebooks, standard notebooks. You can go out with copy paper, just any way that you do it best to remember. I remember best by drawing and actually noting where everything is on the plant. but I understand everyone learns differently. So I'm not saying there's a right way or a wrong way. I'm saying just do whatever works for you. And I know what you're probably thinking, well, what if I can't draw? And that is one thing I will also want to discuss in this video. So in the past, we've talked about paying attention to the margins. You can also pay attention to the venation on the leaf, the base of the leaf, the tip of the leaf, the shape of the leaf, whether it is opposite, alternate, compound, simple. You don't have to draw it perfectly. We're not entering an artist contest. But what I want you to do is draw those differentiating features. So if it has serrated leaf margins, draw that. May not look pretty, but I promise you, by drawing it, you will start to remember those features. So if it has a certain leaf shape, margin, venation, arrangement on the stem, not only are you going to think about it from the dichotomous key standpoint, but you're also going to think about it from, hey, I drew this, I remember it. It's being, etched into my brain. So, again, I'm not saying drawing is for everyone, but don't get discouraged and not draw just because you don't think you're an artist or you draw perfectly. Whatever works best for you is great. So here I have identified this sweet gum, and we can tell the leaves are alternate on the branch, and this is the leaf for a sweet gum. So you can see it's got palmate venation on it. You can see the veins a little bit better back here. Palmately lobed, and it's got serrated margins. You can see the serrations running through there. So let's look at how we would draw this so that we can start identifying it. So now we have our index card here. Now I really like the index cards that have the lines on the back. To me, they're a lot easier to kind of note on, but I had these at the house and I didn't want to waste them, so we're going to go ahead and use up these, and then I'll go get a new pack. Now, I typically like to use just a mechanical pencil. Really, anything works. One thing I will say is, if you get one of the more traditional wooden pencils, as long as you have a pocket knife with you, which I highly recommend carrying a pocket knife when you're in the woods, you can always sharpen it, whereas this, you can run out of lead. So sometimes the wooden pencils are better. I used to keep some in my vest. They fall out very easily, so you have to keep track of them, where I do like the little clips here, but there's a lot of different ways you can do it. So when we start to draw this, I want you to start looking at it from an identification point of view. You're not trying to draw this, 100% correct. You're just trying to get it close enough so that you can look at it and identify it. So the first thing I like to do is I will start off with the leaf petiole right here and going up into the veins. Now if you look, this goes all the way to the tip, so you can just go ahead and let's draw that all the way up to the tip. But then right in here there's going to be one going off there, 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 and there. So now we can just do that, that, and that. So now we see that it's serrated margins. So we're just going to now connect each of these on with serrated margins. You can see, my drawing's not perfect. Just trying to get it to where I can look at it and be able to identify it. Okay, so now if you look, it's got some veins coming off of our larger veins. So we'll just do that. So there is kind of a sweet gum leaf. Now, how do we note that it's alternate or opposite? So I'm going to go in, and this is going to be a little branch. A branch here. It's going to join in. Now we're going to have a bud specific to this leaf, and then we're going to do another leaf. Now you don't have to draw the whole thing, just something so that you can note a leaf there. And there is our sweet gum. So now you can go and own this. Just write sweet gum, and sweet gum is basically everywhere. So it's going to be really hard to note that this is at a specific spot. But now I know if I see this leaf shape right here, that it will be this, and it's a sweet gum. So we'll go through and we'll do this for each of the trees that we want to identify today, and that way we can start remembering it. So far we've drawn 3 different leaves, and they're kind of similar and kind of different. So if you pay attention, just as we talked about when we drew it, you have the alternate branching and the 5 lobes in the leaf. Then we drew the box elder here, and you can see it is pinnately compound, a little bit of trifoliate compound depending on, technically it's classified as pinnate because it can have 5, but a lot of times you will see the 3. But if you pay attention, you can see it is opposite instead of alternate. So that's one way we can tell the difference. You can also tell the difference. It's compound. The sweet gum is simple. And then we have the red maple that we just finished drawing. And if we look at it, you can see it is simple, it's opposite, and it's 3-lobed. So now, if you see a tree leaf and it's 5-lobed, serrated margins, alternate branching, we can start to identify this as a sweet gum. And with drawing this, writing it, researching it, it'll start to stick in your mind a little bit better. Also, using the flashcards, you can practice. What is this? Identify it, flip it over, sweet gum, make sure you got it right. And you can do that for each of the trees that we have here. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is pick the stuff that you're having a problem identifying. You know, I drew sweet gum. Sweet gum is a very easy tree to identify, and if you want to learn it, this is a good way to do it. However, if you already know sweet gum, you don't have to draw this for the plants that you already know and you already recognize. So if you can identify sweet gum, you don't have to do this. But if you're trying to learn stuff, this is how you learn it, is by figuring out a way that you can memorize it. That's all we're doing is memorizing. So let's go. There's a few other plants that I want to draw out, specifically because they can be misidentified as other plants, and that way we can start to pay attention to the differences and be able to tell them apart. So down here we actually have the last 3 plants that I want to identify. Now, right here we have poison ivy, and don't worry, I'm not going to touch it, but this is something that you don't want to touch. Here we have Virginia creeper. This is fine to touch. It's not going to bother you. And here we have blackberry. Now, how can we start to differentiate among these plants? And let's draw their differences. All right, so let's start off by drawing the poison ivy, because that's what we want to remember, and then let's draw the differences between them. So if we start off with the poison ivy, it's going to have a trifoliate leaf, just like we saw in the box elder. So you'll come out there's your leaf. Here are your leaflets. And if you look, there's kind of a deeper curve on the bottom than on the top. It's inequilateral. So we're going to draw that. And you can actually get some lobes down here. But typically this side is not going to be lobed. We're going to do this a little bit more smoother. Now if you look at the venation is actually opposite, so it doesn't quite line up on the main vein here. So we're just going to kind of note that. And then you'll have your terminal leaf. And that's one thing I like about the pencil. You can erase it. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Mine's not. So now when we get down, we can draw our stem, or our branch, or in this case, vine, actually. And now we can do this, and that's how we can start to tell poison ivy apart. And actually, if you want to, you can just make a little vine so that you know it's a vine. That is poison ivy. Now let's look at the differences between it and the blackberry here. So the blackberry, we have a lot more serrated margin, but we're going to have the same alternate leaf arrangement. So we go up just like we did. Here is our petiole rachis and main vein. Here are our leaflets coming off. But we're going to draw these out a lot more sharply lobed. Well, if I don't draw it backwards. Okay. And another way to kind of tell blackberry apart is looking at the veins. So some of those you can see they don't quite line up perfectly. These are a little bit more symmetrical at the base. Now you can get a little bit not quite lining up. But for the most part, the bases are going to line up on these. So we'll draw that in. Okay, now, though, this has thorns poison ivy does not. So now we can draw little thorns up through here. And here is our branch, twig that it's on, little bud. Now this is also going to have thorns. And then you're going to have your alternate branching. Now the Virginia creeper, you're going to draw the same way, but instead of having 3 leaflets, it will now have 5. Another difference is on your poison ivy and on your blackberry, you will have a little rachis going right there. You can see it here. On your Virginia creeper, you won't. So you're going to have a leaf stem, your petiole coming up, and then you're going to have your 5 leaflets coming out of that one central location. And now you can just go in and draw. And again, it's not going to be perfect. It doesn't need to be. We're not entering an art contest. It's just to remember Alright, so again, not a great drawing, but we get the point of it. And if you look at the veins, they're coming out the same way. So we'll draw those. Here's your branch. Oh, in this case, again, vine, so we'll draw this will kind of be our vine shape. So now we've drawn 6 different leaves, and I think 6 is a good number. I encourage you to go out and do this continuously, and that way you can get through them. This same technique works whether it's a understory tree, the big pines behind me, or even if it's some of the grasses like you see around the edge of the pond. You can do the same thing for each of these. Now when we're noting, again, pay attention to where it is, the time of the year. Also, if you have like this honeysuckle here, man, this stuff smells good this time of the year. You can note when they flower. You can note where they're flowering on your property. And that way you can actually start to learn the ecosystem that you're in. This is all getting back to learning the ecology, learning when everything happens, and understanding what is out on your property. So I hope you got something out of today's video. If you did, I encourage you, please share it with a friend or a family member that you think will get something out of it, and comment down below any helpful tips that you have for remembering what trees are out on your property or how to identify them. And until next time, happy management and God bless.